This is Red, White, and Bluegrass.
An administrative freeze on federal assistance such as loans and grants appears to be in limbo this weekend after the White House rescinded the memo issuing the order. A spokesperson says the order itself will still be implemented. To what extent remains unclear. A court had temporarily blocked the order until Monday. Governor Andy Beshear told us this week Kentucky gets $22 billion in federal grant funding, and that makes up 40% of the state's annual spending.
You looked at some portion of that does things like funding Head Start, that funds Medicaid, which we were locked out of for almost an entire day. There is no rural health care in Kentucky without Medicaid.
Only for us to quickly look at the scams, dishonesty, waste, and abuse that's taken place in our government for too long. As was explicitly stated, this in no way affected Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, or other entitlements that Americans depend on.
So a few days since this happened, we've had time to let the dust settle a little bit and hopefully learn more. But, you know, this is still an objective by the new administration. So I'll start with you, Representative Moore, here. Why do you think the reaction was so explosive? Help put it into context for folks who may not have understood. And was the reaction appropriate?
Well, first off, for those who may not have understood, that's probably still everyone in this room and everyone watching. I don't think any of us really know what the full measure of this executive order was or is going to be. But I think the reason that the action was so massive and so swift was two things. How broad it was, which it seemed to be just about everything, and then how immediate it was. It's literally as of right now. I know that between the time the EO came out and it was rescinded, in that short period of time, I was actually visiting with a local center, Greenhouse 17, and they take in people who are trying to flee domestic abuse and domestic violence, and they didn't know what was going on, and this is a very integral part of this community. It's a needed service, but them and many other local nonprofits and services are reliant on those funds to provide that to local Kentuckians.
Senator Elkins, I'll bring you in here. Obviously, the objective there is to reduce bloat. Was this the best way to approach that?
As a business person myself, and I often go into businesses that are failing and troubleshoot, and the very first thing you do is turn the spigots off. As many spigots as you can, you've got to turn off and stop that spending. Now, that doesn't mean that you stop spending for critical measures, so I think that was never his intention, Mr. Trump's intention, to stop spending for measures that are critical to our nation and moving forward. But I do think he was going to turn off the spigots for the ancillary products, and you eventually turn them back on gradually at a time. But the first thing you do is you have to stop that spending, that flow of money going out the door. It's the only way to get that done. And you're right, it does create a massive blowback or a very large response, I guess you would say. So I think he probably could do a better job managing that response.
On that, you're talking about from the business environment, which makes a lot of sense. We're talking about money that was approved and appropriated by Congress, which there's just different regulations there. So I do think there was something that was improper about trying to shut that all down.
I don't want to go too deep into hypotheticals, but considering y'all's position as lawmakers, we're not in a budget year right now. If this were to proceed as it was originally portrayed and whatever comes next, I mean, generally, how would lawmakers approach having to readdress the budget? Would you have to reopen the budget? I'm genuinely curious what would have to happen here.
The goal is naturally not to reopen the budget in a non-budget year. That's not something we typically want to do, but I do know that our budget staff is watching very closely what these cuts may mean and what they may do and what we may have to do in response to them. So I know that they're going to keep a very close eye on that, and we will respond accordingly.
And I think it's going to be both the legislative staff and everyone who works in that side of the House, but also the governor's staff and all the executive agencies. I think we're all going to have to buckle down together and find out, all right, what are our shortfalls if this stops, and where are going to be our critical needs if we need to pick it up on our own.
We've got about 30 seconds left here, guys, as we wrap it up. As the Trump administration moves forward on this, is there any particular areas you think should or should not be on the table?
I naturally think critical services should not be on the table. Anything that has to do with national defense should not be on the table. Social Security should not be on the table. Many of those measures definitely should not be on the table, and I don't think they will be, and it never was his intention for them to be.
Your answer before we move on.
And if we think about basic needs, if you need clean water, you need a roof over your head, you need food to survive, I think those things that keep people alive who are American citizens, make sure that that money doesn't turn off either.